The wheel turns and the world shifts. Winter's hand, white-knuckled and grasping, begins to slip. Frost retreats to the shadowed hollows, to the deep places where cold still lingers. But light comes creeping, slow and golden, stretching across the hills, spilling into the bones of the land. This is spring, the door standing half ajar, the hush between breaths. Beneath the soil, roots tremble. Seeds, tight-fisted through the long dark, begin to awaken. Green fingers claw their way to the first light, tentative, then wild and unstoppable. The earth exhales and stirs beneath its sodden sheets, winter's weight pressing, pounding, pushing, but light seeps into bog mound and crevice, molten gold pooling in the fields. The hare watches from the hedgerow, ears twitching, waiting. He knows the old magic, the pulse of the waking world. The eggs lie nestled in undergrowth, warm and rested, heavy with the promise of life. Spring is a hunger, an ache, a stretch beneath the lilac dawn. It is the quickening, the moment before the leap, the sap in the trees, the blood in the veins, the drumbeat beneath the ribs. Spring stands at the threshold, one hand in the dark, one in the light. The wheel has turned once more. I cannot tell you how happy it makes me to see the snowdrops and the crocus and even the daffodils coming out and all of the earth waking up and coming back to life around this time of year. I've even seen bumblebees looking for flowers, and it just feels so nice after a long and tiresome winter to know that the sun really does return every year and everything is waking up again. So this video is all about the spring equinox. So the spring equinox, sometimes referred to as the vernal equinox, is the time of year where the sun is directly above the Earth's equator, and this means that there is a balance between dark and light, night and day. And this usually falls around March the 19th to the 21st. There can be a little bit of variation. Okay, so it's an astronomical event, it is a seasonal event, and the question is, why would anyone care? Do people care? And what can you do if you are interested and want to celebrate this time of year? Because there's a lot of misinformation online about modern neo-pagan festivals like Ostara and even like goddesses and things like that. So me being me, I always have to really dig into the history, the facts, the sources, and see what's what. And just because certain things happened in the past doesn't mean that we have to do it in this day. As you'll find with the spring equinox, there's not tons of evidence of things going on in the past. However, that doesn't mean we can't do stuff in the modern day. It's all about following your intuition, following your heart, and doing what feels right for you. So when we look into history and folklore for things like winter, the winter solstice, or Imbolc, which we've just had in February, we can find a lot of evidence actually for different celebrations. Winter in particular is rife with tradition. There's creatures and characters and little variations depending on area, and songs and sayings and, you know, all sorts of things. And when we get to the spring equinox, it's pretty scarce. There isn't tons of evidence for much going on, particularly in the British Isles and Ireland. It seems like the Celtic seasonal festivals were more around Imbolc, Beltane, Lunasa, Samhain, and not based around the equinoxes. So that's that. However, there are little bits throughout history where we can see that people are aware of it and maybe they were celebrating it. So an example of that is a cairn in Ireland called Lough Crew. This is a Neolithic passage tomb, which means it is older than the Egyptian pyramids. So this is not a Celtic thing, this is older than that. And it was designed so that when the sun rises on the spring equinox, it illuminates one of the chambers, and there's a stone in there with all of these intricate carvings and patterns, and it illuminates that stone exactly on the spring equinox. There are various things carved into the rock, kind of looks like sun, and then what they call fishbone or like ribcage inscriptions, and some people have said that this could represent the the night sky. So there's clear evidence there that the Neolithic people were aware of the equinoxes and felt that the spring equinox was important enough that they would construct this incredibly huge and complex chamber to be aware of it. So that's something very interesting. We don't know anything else about it, but we know that they were aware of it. There's also a place called West Kennet Longbarrow in southern England, and I actually went there last year, and it was quite funny because we could hear this like strange noise coming from this passage tomb, and then we went in and there was a guy playing a didgeridoo, but the acoustics in there are amazing, so he was like, yeah, this is like a spiritual thing for me to like come in here and like play the didgeridoo and like feel the vibrations and stuff. Exactly what you'd expect from that area of the country, but it's a really incredible site, and there's a little bit of indecision about this. Some people aren't 100% sure that it does align with the spring equinox because there's a big massive rock in front of the door itself that doesn't let sunlight come in, but some people say it is actually aligned with it, so that could be a potential one as well. There is a temple at Stanydale in the Shetland Islands around Scotland, and this is also a Neolithic temple, and this is a place that aligns with the spring equinox. So when it rises in alignment with the doorway, and then 2 standing stones there as well. So again, multiple pieces of evidence for Neolithic peoples across different areas who were aware of and cared about the spring equinox enough to create a structure like that. I will not pretend to know tons about other countries outside of the British Isles and Ireland, but I wanted to mention this as well because I thought it was really cool when I was researching. There is a Mayan temple in Mexico that is so constructed that during the time of the spring and the autumn equinox, the sunlight creates this kind of serpent that comes down the stairway, and this can symbolise the return of the feathered serpent god. So I thought that was very cool as well. It's not just restricted to this area, there's different places all over the world, ancient cultures who are interested in the spring equinox. And then we can look at calendars as well and see what do the calendars have to say about the spring equinox or this time of year in general, because this is where we start getting into the weird Ostara territory, which I will touch on in just a second. But first of all, looking more ancient than that. There are various places in the world or ancient calendars where this time of year was more likely to be the new year. January being the new year is very new actually in terms of like human history. That came with the Gregorian calendar. And the Romans, for example, they started their new year in March, and it was named after Martius, the Roman god of war. And they basically just wrote off January and February as like lost months in the winter that weren't anything. They didn't even have a name, which is really interesting. So March was the beginning of the new year. The Babylonian calendar also started the year with the first new moon after the March equinox, and this would be the day where the goddess Ishtar would return from the underworld. Things like the Persian calendar celebrating New Year around the 20th, 21st as well. And then various stories around springtime as well. You probably have heard about Greek mythology, so Persephone and Demeter and that sort of thing. And Persephone would be in the underworld with Hades, and in the springtime she would come back up and meet her mother Demeter, and that was the beginning of the springtime around this time of year. Now let's talk about Ostara, because when you type in anything involving Ostara or spring equinox into Google, you will start getting a lot of misinformation, and even the AI summary of Google, this is why you should never trust these things, what it's doing is pulling information from the internet, and when this information is spread so widely, it just sees that it's been posted everywhere and it will share that. So I always like to exercise caution and really dig into it. So I'm like, Ostara, okay, where's that from? Who thought of that? Where does it trace back to? Are there any written records of it? And this kind of thing. And this is how you find out that Ostara is a brand new thing. And it is the modern neo-pagan Wiccan wheel of the year. And that is not to diminish it whatsoever. I love celebrating Ostara, and I think there's really nice things that you can do at this time of the year, which I'll get into in just a little bit. But I like to also look at history as well. It's really interesting, and it gives you like just a good basis on where things come from and more connection to the land that you're on as well. So quick search of Ostara on Google, you'll see stuff like Ostara is a Germanic goddess of life and rebirth, and the pagans celebrated it and stuff like that. We have no evidence for that. They might have done, we don't know. So again, we have to go back to my favourite, the monk Bede, who was a monk writing in the 8th century, and he obviously was not interested in paganism. However, he did write a few passing mentions to stuff that pagans did. So I'll just read out what he said. He said, Eostre Monath has a name which is now translated Paschal month, and which was once called after a goddess of theirs named Eostre, in whose honour feasts were celebrated in that month. That is it. That is the only mention in the whole of human history of Eostre. And everything from that has been conjecture, theories, and that sort of thing. So that's very interesting to me. I'm glad Bede mentioned it, it's good to know. And that word, Eostre, has been linked to translations of dawn, morning, that type of thing. So that's very interesting, obviously very fitting for this time of the year as well. It's a shame that we don't know much more about this goddess. So obviously you get a lot of historians and writers theorising, coming up with different ideas for more about this goddess or this time of the year. So Jacob Grimm, who is known for the Grimm's fairy tales, was a folklorist and a linguist, so he was always writing and theorising and very interested in this kind of thing. So in 1835 he wrote his book Deutsche Mythologie, and he just kind of guessed, proposed, theorised that this goddess must have been a Germanic goddess called Ostara, and that was what he said. In 1874, in another book titled Deutsche Mythologie by Adolf Holtzmann, he wrote about the idea of the Easter hare and tried to kind of like pull a few of these ideas together, and he wrote, the Easter hare is inexplicable to me, but probably the hare was the sacred animal of Ostara, just as there is a hare on the statue of the Celtic goddess Abnova. So that was him putting together a few different things. Over time this gets more and more developed upon, and then we've got this idea of Ostara as being a goddess of spring that pagans actively worshipped and is associated with hares and stuff like that. So very interesting. I don't have all the answers obviously, and there's probably stuff I've missed as well, but this is where I get to in my research when I'm sort of digging into it a little bit more. So I find that all very interesting. I hope you do as well. And what I would say is that it doesn't really matter what happened in history with regards to your personal practice and things that you want to do. It can be really, really nice to look at old folk traditions and bring those back into the modern day, because obviously they meant a lot to people at the time. There's a reason that they have survived and that sort of thing. So it is really nice to do that. But once I made a video talking about the Wheel of the Year, and I had some angry Wiccans who were upset that I was saying that a lot of this stuff wasn't rooted in history. It's not an attack on Wicca whatsoever, and it's not an attack on people celebrating Ostara. I just think we shouldn't spread misinformation on the internet if we can. So I still really like to celebrate the Wheel of the Year, which is the modern neo-pagan Wheel of the Year. Why do I do that? Because it is a really nice opportunity to connect with the seasons, and in this modern life it's really easy to become really disconnected with what's going on outside. We spend so much time inside, whether it's work or just everyday life, and we don't have that same connection with the landscape anymore. So to me, these seasonal celebrations are a really, really nice and simple way to just access that. So following the Celtic festivals that I talked about earlier, but then also the equinoxes as well, it's just nice, and it helps you connect with the landscape and things like that as well. So I would recommend doing it. So let's get into some ideas for ways that you could celebrate Ostara in the modern day, the spring equinox, whatever you would like to call it. And a disclaimer that I feel bad about sometimes, obviously I'm in the northern hemisphere, so I'm talking about spring. Apologies to anyone who's in the southern hemisphere, yeah, I don't know what to say. So here it is spring, which means that this is a time to plant seeds, and literally plant seeds, grow things. But you can do this literally or figuratively. Perfect time to start planting things for the garden or a windowsill. So you might want to get some flower seeds, you might have a little vegetable garden, whatever it is you want to do, flower bulbs as well. And it can be really nice, even if you don't have a garden, just to plant a little something and put it on the windowsill and watch it grow. And it is just such a reminder of the magic of this season, that literally a little tiny seed can become this plant. It's incredible, and it just helps you appreciate the springtime and the growth. And you could tie this into metaphorically planting seeds as well, through maybe like a really simple ritual. So like when you're planting the seed of a plant, you think about the intention or the thing that you want to grow within your life within the spring, and that's what you're focusing on when you are doing the planting. And then every time you water it, you're thinking about it, and it kind of grows along with you and your intention as well. Or just generally kind of setting intentions for the year. A lot of people do this in January. I still like to do a lot of plotting and planning and dreaming in this time of year in the winter, but spring is now, okay, it's time to take action on some of those things that you were dreaming about and wanting, and it's a really good opportunity to do this around the spring equinox. Another great thing that you can do is just to go outside and observe nature. I mention this every time, and I never will not, because it's free. It is accessible to anyone, even if you don't live really close to nature. Maybe you can find like a local park or a community garden or something, and you'll be surprised at what you can find if you really stop to look. And have a look at what plants are coming up. It's so nice at this time of the year to see the first spring flowers and the little like green buds, and it's just so lovely. So take the time to take like a nice walk and look at all the different signs of spring. You can hear the birds again, even insects, like whatever it is, and you can either just walk and enjoy it, or you could take it a step further and do like a nature journal or something where you are writing down about the things that you're seeing, or you can do like a little sketch painting, photographs, whatever, and using that as a way to deepen your connection with the landscape. So maybe you take a picture of a plant that you've never seen before, you go home and research it, you write a little page about it. These kind of things can help you really deepen your connection with the landscape. It's just really nice to do, and it's the simplest way, but I think the best way to commemorate each seasonal shift. You could also use this as an opportunity to do a little bit of early spring foraging. So it depends where you live and what's out for you. So for me at the minute, we've got the wild garlic coming out, we've got really early spring nettles, stuff like that. So it might be a good opportunity to do a little bit of foraging and maybe create something really nice from the things that you forage. Obviously be safe, be sensible, make sure you know what you are foraging, but it can be a really nice way again to deepen your understanding of the world that is around you and get into a relationship with it, like literally interest in it. So that leads me on nicely to another one, which is cook, bake, something like that. Food has always been a part of like human celebration, so maybe you can bake something special. It could be something seasonal like hot cross buns. You could, you know, get some wild garlic and make some scones with it, like nettle pasta, like whatever it is. That would be a really nice way to celebrate the spring equinox. And you could just do this by yourself and make something delicious, or you could have some friends around, family, whatever, and do like a nice little spring celebration. Food is always a really good and accessible way to do that. Since the equinoxes are about this time of balance, it can be a good time to reflect on that. Maybe think about, are there any areas of your life that are feeling out of balance and a bit out of whack, or are there things that you can do to sort of bring that balance back? Maybe you need to do some grounding, like walking barefoot outside, literally grounding, or maybe some yoga, breath work, physical movement to get you back into your body. Maybe actually you need to bring more balance in terms of food and health. Maybe you've had like a long winter and now you want to like bring the springtime energy back. Maybe you want to actually cultivate more slowness and you've been working too hard and things like that as well. Eggs are a really big symbol of spring in general, and just this time of year obviously it is a sign of new life and rebirth and creation. So a lot of people like to do things with eggs. So something that you could do is decorate eggs. I mean, this is something that we did in British primary schools. Every year was an egg decorating competition, but you could do it in a different way. Now some people like to use natural dyes, turmeric, beetroot, and that kind of thing, and it's just a nice little thing to do. Maybe you can do it like with a boiled egg, or maybe you want to do it in a different way, like you want to craft an egg out of like paper mache or clay or something and paint it that way so it's more permanent. Whatever it is that you want to do, even creating some art I think is really nice. So think about typical spring imagery, the hares, the eggs, the flowers, that kind of thing as well, and just do something creative. It's a time of year of creation and new life and new beginnings. And the last thing is something that I do for every season, and if you're subscribed to my Patreon then you'll see it in the monthly almanacs that I put out. I create these almanacs where it's like a guide to making the most of the month in a magical way. So it's all the background on like folklore, history, mythology of the month, and then like ideas for rituals, celebrations, recipes, and I always have like media recommendations, so like film, music, books, that kind of thing. And I love to read and consume media seasonally when possible. So this time of the year, pretty much since I was a child, maybe I've missed a few years, but pretty much every year I reread and rewatch The Secret Garden. I just think it is the most perfect spring book ever. It's about a little girl who was brought to her uncle's big manor house when her parents die, and she is really neglected and bitter and a very sour, angry child. And she discovers a secret garden on the landscape, and it's through nurturing that garden she sort of comes back to life and helps other people as well. And the film's really good, but the book is just like even extra because it's got so much imagery of like the wild moorlands of Yorkshire and the flowers and the boy that should be friends and his relationship with animals and stuff. And yeah, it's really nice. So that's a nice thing to do, or just reading like seasonal folklore, poetry, like whatever it may be, I think is a really nice way to celebrate this time of year as well. So that's it, that's my video on the spring equinox. Tried to sprinkle in a bit of like history and folklore with the modern day as always. So please let me know how you celebrate this time of year, or if you have any ideas of things that you want to do, that you want to share with other people in the comments as well. That would be really nice. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.